Yo guys, how are you doing? With the Embers of the World Tree mini set right around the corner, I wanted to have one last look at the current metagame to see how are things right now and how might they shape up. What do I expect how the mini set will, well, change the meta or maybe not. So let's get right into it and let's not talk around it. There is a clear best deck this format, although I don't think it's good enough to put it in tier 0. There are definitely a couple of things that can compete with it, but it's pretty clearly Drunk Paladin. Drunk Paladin is just all around very strong, cheats out quite big minions, quite big boards pretty early into the game. And then with the Ursul Shalatrasul combo as well, a lot of lethality, a lot of game-ending potential on the later turns. There also are a couple of variants you can go, like especially at High Legend, people started to favor a variant that does not play the Vicious Slither Spear, even though that's a phenomenal card. In many matchups the deck can very easily snowball just that singular card to a game victory, but at Higher Legend people seem to favor the cutting it to find the flicker board more consistently with the Libra, and then also taking things like Resistance Aura, which help a lot in many matchups in the current metagame. There are a lot of spell-based decks, not to mention the Mirror. Drunk Paladin itself is a very spell-heavy deck, so pretty good options there. It also has a very good matchup spread. It's basically favored or even against pretty much everything. There really is not a lot that beats Paladin, but one thing is very good at it, and even aside from that, a super strong deck, and that's Rogue. In particular, Ashermain Rogue, I feel like, is the best variant. Just very strong early game potential with Harbinger, and Ashermain just really strong mid to late game, especially with all the mana cheating involved. This deck is insane, but statistically it's not performing well, and that's because I think it's a very difficult deck, especially because you get in a lot of awkward situations and really have to plan things out depending on the matchup and current situation. Like sometimes you may want to be a bit more conservative with the cards in your hand, but if you have Ashermain you really want to dump them, and looking at I think it's quite difficult. And then the third best deck in my opinion, and statistically performing actually better than Ashermain Rogue, but like I said, Ashermain Rogue is a very difficult deck, and this one is pretty straightforward, but still top tier, and that's Ballhawk Cliff Dive Demon Hunter. Very strong deck, like quite a bit of lethality, a lot of value, a lot of lifesteal, and basically makes this kind of a triangle meta game where Rogue beats Paladin, Demon Hunter beats Rogue, and Paladin basically beating most other things. There are a couple more decks that are good against Rogue that will come to mention, but this is all around the one with the, well, most favorable matchup spread, which is why we have it here. It also has, while it does not have quite as much flexibility in its builds, it does have the option to tag in one of the 7 mana Fell Bats to get even more death rattle and basically just win against almost every other slower deck. So that option is there, but that does hurt the more aggressive matchups quite substantially. Another big contender I thought about putting in tier 1, but I think we'll put them just at the top of tier 2 is Death Knight. And first of all, we have Hand Buff Death Knight, which is a very, very strong deck, even though that it's not faring particularly well against Drunk Paladin. That's a pretty even matchup. So if you see a lot of Paladin, Death Knight should probably offer you a better choice, and that's Menagerie Death Knight. I chose the Menagerie deck because there theoretically are other Menagerie variants you can run as well. Most importantly, Demon Hunter, which is very, very good as well. But considering that the decks are pretty similar, I don't feel like there's a lot of reason to play Demon Hunter instead of Death Knight currently. Which is why I chose to only have this deck here. This is, yeah, like I said, a little bit worse in most other matchups, but beats Paladin more consistently. That is a trade-off that can definitely be worth it. Then another tier 2 deck we have is Starship Death Knight, which is also a very, very good deck. Also above even, probably slightly unfavored against Paladin, but very, very good against Rogue. Pretty good against Rogue, and also pretty even against Demon Hunter, so matches up really well, but has certain decks that are pretty difficult to beat, and we'll get to those in a second. Another one I chose to put this in because this is still a phenomenal deck, and that's Pirate Rogue. The thing with Pirate Rogue is that it evolved to be actually pretty similar to Ashamain, and similarly to the Menagerie variants, I feel like the standard Ashamain Rogue is just slightly better, so there's not a whole lot of reason to play this. Unless obviously you just enjoy the Pirate variant more, like that's obviously fine. And then we still have one interesting deck that I want to mention, and that's your Warlock. And technically this is 3 decks. This is, I just put Starship Warlock, Weir Warlock, and Mill Warlock all under this umbrella because I feel like they all are kind of different variants of the same deck, and abusing just the insane interactions the Warlock class has with Ancient of Yore, and then just leaning into different win conditions a little bit more. And this is very interesting because this is one of the decks that's very dependent on your meta. Like it managed to be, especially certain variants, managed to be pretty even against Paladin and very much beat up on Rogue. But there are a couple of decks that really pose a lot of trouble, and one of them is the Cliffdive Demon Hunter. This is pretty difficult for the deck, and basically all decks with some pretty good OTK combo, a lot of direct damage, most notably Zarimi Priest, and this one is similarly interesting because this is very popular at lower ranks. Warlock is very much unplayable there, but it has a pretty bad matchup against Paladin and Rogue, both the two best decks. So the higher you get, the more popular these two classes become, the worse Zarimi becomes, until at top legend it's pretty much unplayable, which then opens up Warlock to be played. And this is a competent deck. This is really strong, and it feels very oppressive because it often combos turn 8 or 9, and with how strong the first couple of turns are of this deck, it's actually pretty difficult to beat it in time. And these two decks do it very consistently, but if you play them suboptimally, the margins are pretty thin. Like, this has pretty weak turns 5, 6, 7 is a big board clear, so killing it before that is actually rather difficult. But if you play the matchup well, these decks just demolish Zerimi, and for that reason I can't really put it higher than tier 3 in my humble opinion. Which is good. Like, it's a pretty toxic deck, not gonna lie. Not gonna lie, it is a pretty toxic deck. Another deck I would want to put in tier 2 though is, I think, Zerg Egg Hunter. This is pretty solid, just all around solid aggro deck. People seem to really not like it, but it's good, it's playable. And yeah, similarly, there's also Aggro Paladin. I kind of forgot about it, but this is also actually pretty high in tier 2 here maybe. Just the issue is it's basically a drunk paladin with more early game, but not cheating out as many big minions. And with how early drunk paladin cheats them out, or can even snowball with vicious slither spear if you want, there's also not a whole lot of reasons to play this over drunk paladin, in all honesty. Then at tier 3, like pretty competent decks that probably don't perform as well against the best decks in the meta, and very, very fitting for that description we have Protoss Mage. This is a deck, people like it a lot. It feels pretty good because its late game is so strong, and it really beats up on decks like Warlock, but it has a hard time against, yeah, most not super slow decks in the format, to be quite honest. So if you see a lot of Warlock or other slow classes, like, this can be worth running, but it's pretty unlikely to work out particularly well. And similarly, Druid. Imbue Druid, this is another deck that struggles a lot with Drunk Paladin, and because of that has quite difficulties in the metagame, even though it's actually not not that bad against many other decks, and can actually put up quite a lot. Next up, we also have Protoss Rogue. I should mention Protoss Rogue. Protoss Rogue is, well, just another good deck, but compared to Ashen Mane Rogue, it doesn't have a lot to offer that Ashen Mane Rogue can't do, and then the mana cheating and top end of Ashen Mane Rogue are just superior. So again, not really a reason to play that, to be completely honest. And similar story actually for Handbuff Hunter. It and Handbuff Death Knight are like not as similar as the Rogue decks, but they do have pretty similar matchup spreads, except for the fact that Handbuff Hunter has a lot harder time against Rogue, which Handbuff DK is actually relatively even. So again here, why would you play this if you can play Handbuff Death Knight? And then lastly, for tier 3, I have Blood Control Paladin. Blood Control Paladin struggles. Paladin Death Knight struggles a lot against like the Warlocks, the mages, the Zorimis, so that's pretty difficult, but theoretically against the top decks it's actually relatively fine. Like it's pretty good against Rogue, it's okay-ish against Paladin. It loses super hard to this, but it's really strong against most aggressive decks, and if you want to use it to punish that, that's fine, but it very heavily loses to all the things that punish slower decks, obviously. And then lastly, I will put this at the top of tier 4. Starship Rogue. Like, there are some top players that really like the deck, that actually perform on it. I'm not super sure on that. Like, statistically, it's a super hard deck, so we can't really look at statistics, but I'm not quite sure why you would play this over any other of the decks that punish slower decks, and it's so difficult. I don't think it's really worth to put the time into, and well, then why would you play it at all, honestly? Like, I think even if you pilot it super well, it's probably not a lot better than maybe top of tier 3, bottom of tier 2, and yeah, probably not worth investing the time. Murmur Shaman has some good matchups, but overall just yeah, gets abused really hard by these two. Particularly it works off obviously well against Cliff Dive because of Hex, but yeah, with most other thing, like with the other top decks, it very struggles a lot, even with like Death Knights and things. Similar story for Warrior. I just chose one Warrior. There are a couple of different versions you can go, depending on if you want to go full like chemical spell, maybe with a mech variant, or like more the classic Terran Warrior. But they all just yeah, don't perform well enough against the Paladins and Rogues, which actually are not particularly favored, and then loses against all the super slow punishing decks as well. So theoretically I don't think those are bad decks, but they don't line up well into the meta right now. That's the main issue here. But talking about bad decks, Spell Mage, like, it's a very fun deck, and it can really feel very strong if you like high roll, but on average it's just bad. And similar story sadly for all imbued decks other than Druid. So all the other ones sadly don't really perform at all. Priest and Shaman are particularly weak, but really they all are pretty bad and could use a lot of help. And well, we all know in the mini set that they will get a lot of help, and I hope that one or two of these could maybe move up a spot. Maybe two, like the 3-mana draw 2 for Imbue decks is very good, but I don't know how much that will impact things. The biggest one I could see moving up is Mage, because they also get a very good draw spell. So maybe Mage can make the jump, maybe to climb up a little bit higher, but I don't think there is a lot of hope there. But Druid will probably climb a tier up for sure. I'm pretty certain on that. Obviously, it depends on if we get like nerfs, balance changes with that. But Druid gets a couple of good cards, and I definitely can see uses for them in Imbue Druid. So I think this has a good chance of moving up. Then Death Knight has a couple of interesting things going for it. Death Knight has another one of the best sets, I think, of the mini set. Although the Dark Gift synergy, we'll have to see if that finds a spot in any of the Death Knight decks, but I could definitely see something being there. So let's see how, well, let's see if we can find that package, that Dark Gift package, if we can find space for it in any of the Death Knight decks. Rogue and Paladin, though, I feel like will stay the dominant decks. Both got, well, Rogue got actually a really good set that already runs a lot of Dark Gift synergies, so the sword, the 1 mana 4/2 basically, if you have a Dark Gift, will be very strong in this. And, well, Drunk Paladin didn't really get a whole lot. Maybe the 1 mana fire spell is good enough, but it's so strong. I think it will definitely stay in tier 1, although it might be pushed down from the others, mainly because Demon Hunter is also getting a very, very good card. And actually not necessarily one that we might see in Warlock Demon Hunter, although Sigil of Cinder might just make the cut to try and have a little bit better removal. But it might not be necessary due to Tindra Sage Swift. Tindra Sage Swift for this deck seems very good, seems to solve a couple of the issues the deck has, mainly with it having a lot of difficulties removing big minions. And if there are big minions, Ballhawk, Death Rattles really often stop mattering, and the AoE, 4 damage AoE from Tindra Sage Swift could really help out there. So we have to see. Maybe that's enough to win back enough of the Paladin matchup to actually overtake it in the overall tier list. Imbue Hunter also gets a couple of interesting cards. I actually forgot about that when talking about the Imbue cards. So maybe Imbue Hunter has a chance as well, but I don't really see it a lot. The slower Warlock decks could also find some interesting stuff with Conflict Rate. Maybe they suddenly get so consistent that they are particularly good. So we'll have to see on that. There definitely is potential to find something here. And lastly, we have Warrior. I could see us finding a Warrior deck that maybe breaches into tier 2, tier 3 with a lot of luck in tier 2, but the cards it gets are definitely all good. 2 of them will probably find some home in a slower Dark Gift Warrior. I definitely could see that. And Keeper of the Flame might even spawn a new Handbuff Warrior, even though I'm not quite sure if we have enough support for that already. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential to find something in Warrior. So that's without any balance changes. So that's without any balance changes. In the next video we're gonna talk about what I think we can expect for balance changes, because I think like maybe a smaller patch with the mini set could make a lot of sense, but we'll have to see. Maybe they wait a couple of days to see how things shake up with the meta once the mini set comes out, so maybe we'll not get it immediately, but I'm pretty sure we are due for a balance patch, either with the mini set or shortly after, so we'll talk about my thoughts on that. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and have a nice day. Bye.